About 20 years ago, Graham Hancock published the worldwide bestseller, Fingerprints of the Gods, the evidence of Earth's lost civilization. It was an amazing book, controversial investigation. I remember doing the radio show, having him on the program. Evidence for Earth's lost prehistoric civilization. Well, now he returns with a compelling sequel, Magicians of the Gods, the forgotten wisdom of Earth's lost civilization. He has new evidence, things that weren't known when the first book came out, and it's just an incredible book with details, already a bestseller. Graham, it is great having you back on the program.
Thank you.
The interesting thing to me is there's so many aspects of this that's fascinating, but when you first came out with the book, you were criticized by some in the scientific community, and now some of them have come around. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about that, and if they didn't read your first book, talk about the premise of that so we have some background.
All right. Well, Fingerprints of the Gods is certainly the book I'm best known for. And the subtitle of that book was The Evidence for Earth's Lost Civilization. Fingerprints of the Gods was published in 1995. The essential proposal was that way back in the last ice age, when our ancestors are supposed to have been nothing more than primitive hunter-gatherers, that there existed on Earth an advanced civilization, a civilization that was capable of exploring and mapping the world, that had scientific abilities, that understood astronomy, in every sense an advanced and sophisticated civilization, and that this civilization was destroyed in a global cataclysm sometime between 13,000 years ago and 11,000 years ago. This was the essential argument of Fingerprints of the Gods, and I explored several possibilities in that book as to what the nature of that cataclysm might have been. But when I wrote that book in 1995, I didn't really have a smoking gun. I had powerful evidence from all around the world that a cataclysm had occurred in that period and had changed the face of the earth completely, but I wasn't really able to come up with a convincing scientific explanation of what had caused that cataclysm. What's happened since then, one of many things that have happened since then and that have led me to write Magicians of the Gods, which is the sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods, is that we now do have a smoking gun. And this smoking gun is not fringe science. It's not from the woo-woo edge of the spectrum. This is absolutely mainstream science. It turns out that the Earth was hit by several fragments of a very large comet, and each of these fragments was in the range of a mile wide, that the Earth was hit by several fragments of a very large comet 12,800 years ago. And that is the smoking gun. That is the cataclysm that changed the Earth completely. Furthermore, those impacts 12,800 years ago brought about a massive climate change on this planet, plunged the Earth into a radical deep freeze just at the time when we seem to be emerging from the last ice age. And then 11,600 years ago, there was a second series of impacts with further fragments from the same comet. And those caused massive sea level rise and huge global instability. So now we have the science that documents global cataclysms in exactly the period that I had indicated that we lost a whole civilization when I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods. And then the second area of information that's made it essential to write a new book is new archaeological discoveries. Most notable amongst them a site in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, which is just rewriting history every day. This is a vastly ancient 11,600-year-old megalithic site on the scale of Stonehenge, but 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, and it just can't be explained in the existing picture of history. And we have other sites in Indonesia and other places around the world, a massive new evidence. That's why I've written the new book.
So interesting. It's fascinating. In your title, these survivors were described as sages, magicians, mystery teachers of heaven. That's so fascinating. Talk a little bit about that.
That's right. There is this memory all around the world of a global cataclysm, often associated with flooding. And again, this is true to what we now know of the geological facts. Sea level rose 400 feet at the end of the Ice Age, and of the destruction of an advanced civilization. These myths and traditions are all around the world. The most famous of them is Plato's story of Atlantis, but it's just one of thousands of such traditions, that we lost a whole civilization at that time. And these myths and traditions describe, or appear to describe very accurately, the events that we now know took place between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago.
And these survivors.
Yes, and I wanted to pick up your point there about the names of these survivors, because what we then read in the mythology is of a group of individuals who are often referred to as magicians. That's why the title of the book is Magicians of the Gods. They're sometimes called the Shining Ones, the Mystery Teachers of Heaven, so on and so forth. And their mission is to travel around the world and teach the gifts of civilization to hunter-gatherer people. So it's important to be clear that what I'm describing is a world which in some ways is not so different from our own today. We live in a world today where we have an advanced technological society, but our advanced technological society coexists with hunter-gatherer peoples. There are hunter-gatherers, for example, in the Kalahari Desert or in the Amazon rainforest. And I'm suggesting it was the same during the Ice Age, 14,000 years ago, that there was an advanced civilization on Earth, and there were also hunter-gatherer peoples. It was the advanced civilization that was most severely impacted by the cataclysm. And survivors of that advanced civilization took refuge amongst hunter-gatherer peoples and sought to pass on some of the skills to civilization to them. So what archaeology describes as the beginnings of civilization, I would describe as a reinvention of civilization after a global cataclysm. And these magicians, these sorcerers, these shining ones, these mystery teachers of heavens, these are the names that were given to the civilizers, the survivors of the lost civilization who traveled around the world and attempted to reignite the story of civilization again.
It's interesting to ponder what they hid in those chambers, in these lost, in these pyramids underground.
There are a number of places where we have hidden chambers. One of them is beneath the left forepaw of the Great Sphinx of Giza. We know from seismic surveys that were done in the early 1990s that there is a large rectangular chamber about 50 feet down underneath the left forepaw of the Sphinx. So far, we don't know what has been in it. It's possible that secret drilling and secret excavation has taken place. There is a great deal of secrecy at the Giza Plateau, but up till now, if that evidence has been found, it has not been shared. All we can say for sure is there is a large chamber deeply buried beneath the Sphinx. We know that there are hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid. Some recent science is beginning to show cavities in the Great Pyramid which were not expected before. In Indonesia, in a place called Gunung Padang, what was formerly thought to be a natural hill with a megalithic site on top of it, has now been discovered to be a pyramid. It's been subjected to a very close geological study by one of Indonesia's leading geologists. They've surveyed the interior of this structure using ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography, and it turns out that there are 3 large chambers within this structure, and I'm hoping within the next year that those chambers may be excavated. So we have these hidden chambers all around the world, and this brings to mind again the notion of a lost civilization and an attempt to conceal, to preserve, to pass down to the future some kind of archive of knowledge from that time.
And it's fascinating to ponder some of the evidence that you found and has been found, and excuse my dog in the background you might hear, but it was fascinating because they predicted that this this huge comet, this debris, this dark matter may hit the Earth in 2030? Talk about that. That's fascinating.
Again, it's important to be clear on this, because I don't want to come across as some kind of mystic prophet.
Right, right.
That's not my thing. I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter, and I'm reporting the facts as I have unearthed them. And there are two very curious categories of fact.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of them is, it comes from science. It comes from astronomers, people like Victor Klube and Bill Napier, leading astronomers, who have been studying a phenomenon called the Torrid meteor stream. I think most people are aware of meteors. We call them shooting stars, these little chunks of space rock that come in and get superheated as they pass through the atmosphere and create a sort of light show in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many different meteor streams, but the Torrid meteor stream has been of particular interest to this group of astronomers. The Earth passes through the Torrid meteor stream twice a year, at the end of June and again in November. And in November, we do see spectacular so-called Halloween fireworks, which are the meteors for this stream. What the astronomical studies have revealed is that hidden within the Torrid meteor stream are a number of very large objects, not little chunks of rock the size of the end of your finger, but there may be one object in there which is as much as 30 miles in diameter. And these objects are all the fragmented remnants of a former giant comet, a comet that may have been more than 100 miles in diameter, which is calculated to have entered the inner solar system about 20,000 years ago, was trapped in an orbit around the sun, an orbit that crosses the orbit of the Earth. Comets have a tendency to break up into multiple fragments. And that comet began to break up into multiple fragments. And these fragments, some very large, some very small, spread out along the whole orbit of the comet. And that's what we're passing through when we pass through the Torrid meteor stream,
Mm-hmm.
passing through the remnants of a fragmented giant comet, the very same comet that caused cataclysmic events on the Earth 12,800 years ago and again 11,600 years ago. It's important to understand comets break into multiple fragments. Some fragments hit the Earth, others stay in orbit. And we are passing through the stream of debris of that comet to this day. We continue to pass through it twice a year. The astronomers that I've mentioned are very concerned about that, and they calculate that we will be passing, during the next 30 years, twice a year, we're going to be passing through a particularly lumpy and dangerous area of the Torrid meteor stream.
Mm-hmm.
They are deeply concerned that the Earth faces possible severe cosmic impacts as a result of this. It's not something to throw up our hands in horror about. We have the technology to avert this danger. This is not certain doom. It's a matter of a choice for the human species. We can choose to pay attention to our cosmic environment, or we can continue to ignore it, as we've been doing up till now. At any rate, the message of the astronomers is clear. We need to be looking at the sky, and we need to be paying attention to the Torrid meteor stream.
Yeah.
Now, moving to the other side, we go to an ancient site in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, which was created 11,600 years ago, immediately after the second series of comet impacts. And at Göbekli Tepe, we find the world's oldest megalithic site. It's 11,600 years old. That's 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. It's a site that doesn't make any sense, that can't be explained in terms of the historical model. And on one of those megalithic pillars, there is a diagram of the sky. There are a series of images, and I present the evidence for this in the book. We don't have time to go into the detail now, which show the sky, not of 11,600 years ago, but our sky today. You see the positions of the stars in the sky change very slowly down the ages. And whoever created Göbekli Tepe was able to calculate those changes forward, as we can do with our science today, and to present us with a picture of the sky in our time at the winter solstice, roughly around the 21st of December, in our epoch, when the sun sits astride the dark rift at the heart of the Milky Way as viewed from Earth between the constellations of Sagittarius and Scorpio. That image, with the sun sitting between the constellations of Sagittarius and Scorpio astride the dark rift of the Milky Way, appears on one of the pillars at Göbekli Tepe, and it can only depict the sky of our time. So that feels, combined with what we know from the astronomers, I find it difficult to resist the possibility that what we're looking at Göbekli Tepe, what we're looking at in Göbekli Tepe, is a warning that has been sent down to us from the remote past, from the last time that the Earth interacted with the debris stream of this really horrible comet.
Yeah, so interesting. The Great Return. It's interesting when you look at what astronomers are saying about that date. It's something, as you said, it's not a prediction, but wow, something to ponder.
Yeah, it's not a prophecy, it's a calculation,
yeah.
It's mathematics. And the calculation raises the alarming possibility that this meteor stream that we pass through twice a year contains within it objects that are capable of ending civilization.
Absolutely.
Ending civilization overnight. And this is where it's important, again, to be clear that we think of our advanced technological society, our civilization, we think of it as very solid, very strong. And in many ways it is. But in other ways, it's very fragile. And the main problem, I think, with our advanced technology is that we are all specialists. We're all good at doing one thing and not very good at doing anything else. Very few of us actually have survival skills, for example. Very few of us know how to hunt and fish. Some of us do. Very few of us know how to plant crops or how to build shelters. These kind of skills are the province of specialists in our society today, and most people don't have those skills. And that suggests to me that our society is actually very fragile. If we were confronted by a truly major cataclysmic event, as happened 12,800 years ago, I do not think our civilization would survive it. We are too specialized, we're too fragile in that sense. The people who would survive it would be the hunter-gatherers of the world. People like the hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari Desert or the Amazon rainforest, because they have the survival skills. They know how to survive. They would not be destroyed in this cosmic cataclysm. And so there's a strange echo of our times and those times of 12,800 years ago, when again I believe that an advanced civilization was destroyed, and it was the hunter-gatherers of that time who survived and who carried the human story forward.
We're talking to Graham Hancock, his latest book, Magicians of the Gods, The Forgotten Wisdom of Earth's Lost Civilization. He has sold millions of books. Perhaps you've seen documentaries at his work. Some of his other titles, The Sign and the Seal, Fingerprints of the Gods, The Message of the Sphinx, Heaven's Mirror, Underworld, and Supernatural, not to mention a couple of adventure novels he's had, Entangled and War God.
Yeah,
now,
I do write novels as well.
Sure.
My main thing is nonfiction. That's what I'm best known for. But as a writer, I also have fun in recent years writing novels in the fantasy adventure genre, and I'm just finishing off a series of novels about the Spanish conquest of Mexico. But I do this for fun and for my amusement more than anything else.
And it's an amazing passion. The implications, and I think we talked about this the first time I had you on the show, the connection to extraterrestrials. Any way you'd like to bring that into this, because when you talk about an advanced civilization, that's just a huge mystery.
Yeah, it's a huge mystery, but in a way it shouldn't be a mystery. I mean, anatomically modern human beings, people exactly like you and I with the anatomically modern brain, have existed on this planet for at least 200,000 years. And it is very odd, if you think about it, that we waited 195,000 years before we established the first civilizations. It's likely that there were earlier civilizations. We've had plenty of time to evolve them. And now that we understand that cataclysmic events have intervened spectacularly in our history, the possibility that we've lost a whole civilization seems to me a more and more reasonable one, and one that we should be inquiring into. Now, let's go another step and say, were aliens, were extraterrestrials involved? I want to make clear that I have nothing against aliens at all. I'm sure that the universe is filled with life. That's what the universe is for. I'm sure around all those beautiful stars up there in the vast and immeasurable heavens, there are planets, and those planets in some cases are populated with intelligent beings. Just like ourselves, they're asking the big questions. Where do we come from? What are we doing here? But was an advanced alien civilization one which had the technology to cross interstellar space and get to planet Earth? Was such a civilization involved in seeding civilization on Earth? I don't think so. I don't see the need for that. All of the anomalies that are cited as evidence that aliens were involved in the human story can much better and much more simply be explained simply with the notion of a lost, advanced human civilization. If I were to find a titanium engine in a stratum going back 20,000 years, I might be obliged to consider the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement. But when I'm looking at megalithic sites, even when very large chunks of stone were moved around, when I'm looking at evidence for mapping of the Earth with great accuracy during the last ice age, I think that a lost human civilization does a much better job of explaining these anomalies than invoking unknown aliens coming to us across interstellar space. For example, if you can cross interstellar space and arrive at this pale blue dot that we call planet Earth,
right,
your navigation is pretty good, right? I mean, you've got to be able to navigate to get to Earth across interstellar space. So if, for example, many people who go for the ancient alien hypothesis cite the Great Pyramid as the ultimate example of aliens must have done this because we don't know how it was done. Well, here's the problem. The Great Pyramid is an incredible structure. It weighs 6 million tons. It's 481 feet high. It's got a footprint of 13 acres. And it is aligned with incredible accuracy to true north. It's just 3/60ths of a single degree off true north. But my point is this. If you're an alien civilization with the technology to cross interstellar space and you're involved with making the Great Pyramid, you're going to get it dead on true north. Absolutely spot on true north, not 3/60ths of a degree off. 3/60ths of a degree off true north looks to me like human error. And I would say the Great Pyramid is the work of human beings, but it incorporates the knowledge of a lost, advanced human culture.
You think Plato clearly knew where those citizens of Atlantis was buried? Does he? Talk about Plato and Atlantis.
The story of Atlantis, everybody has the word Atlantis in their minds, but perhaps not everybody knows where it comes from. The sole source for the story of Atlantis is the Greek philosopher Plato. There are no other original sources of the story of Atlantis. There are many stories around the world of a great lost civilization destroyed in a global cataclysm. But for that civilization to be called Atlantis, we only have Plato. Plato is the source of that story. Now, historians and archaeologists have dismissed Plato's account and said and tried to persuade us that he made the whole thing up, that it was just a kind of work of fiction on his part. But there are details in the Atlantis story, which I go into in Magicians of the Gods, which make that idea almost impossible. Plato incorporates accurate geological knowledge on that story. For example, he says that the submergence of Atlantis occurred 9,000 years before the time of the Greek lawmaker Solon. Solon lived in 600 BC, so 9,000 years before his time is 9,600 BC, which is 11,600 years ago, which is the exact date for what geologists call meltwater pulse 1b. A massive rise in sea level occurred at that time. How could Plato have possibly known that if he made it up? And secondly, 11,600 years ago is the exact date of the foundation of the mysterious site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which just comes out of nowhere with no background. I think we're looking at a transfer of technology. We're looking at the work of the survivors of a lost civilization at Göbekli Tepe. And Plato's story of Atlantis, in my view, is a highly accurate rendition of the events that occurred 11,600 years ago.
This is a great book. I am looking forward to devouring it. It's just fascinating, and you've done such great work on this. In closing, I guess looking ahead to first of all, the new evidence that makes this a lot different than the first book, because things were not known when you wrote the first book, Fingerprints of the Gods.
Yeah.
The two smoking gun bits of information that people need to know that makes this something to ponder even more seriously than they may have. Go over those two again.
Well, it's the evidence, the firm scientific evidence of a global cataclysm that unfolded between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago that changes everything. Now we're not talking anymore in a kind of woolly or vague or general way about a global cataclysm. We are talking about specific events. The Earth being impacted 12,800 years ago by at least 8 fragments of a giant comet, and 11,600 years ago further impacts with further fragments of the same comets. These two episodes of bombardment mark the beginning and end of a period that geologists call the Younger Dryas, 1,200 years of hell on Earth, which changed the face of the Earth completely. Now that we know that happened, this is right in the foundations of what we have been taught is the beginning of the story of civilization. Now that we have the evidence for this global cataclysm between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, we have to consider the possibility that everything we have been taught about the origins of civilization may be wrong. Because up till now, everything that we are taught about the origins of civilization does not take account of this new evidence of global cataclysmic events between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago.
All the details in the new book, Magicians of the Gods. Graham Hancock, it was great having you back on the program. I'm going to stay in touch with you. Always fascinated with whatever you come up with. Great.
Thanks for having me on the show, Alan. Really nice to talk to you again.
You have a great rest of the day.
And my website, by the way, is a good place to go for leads and links to all other aspects of my work. And that's just www.grahamhancock.com.
That's it. And, of course, just take his name, go to YouTube. You'll find so many fascinating things. GrahamHancock.com. Good. I'll be talking to you down the road, my friend.
Thank you, Alan.
Bye-bye.